On this week's Joint of the Week, we're going to do wooden hinges. So this is actually a really fun build. I think it really creates a really nice decorative look, and you don't need any special tools for this. I went out and bought an 1/8 inch brass rod, and then I got an 1/8 inch drill bit. It was actually 12 inches long, but I cut it down. Other than that, just your basic tools: round over bit, table saw, box joint jig. And I think it came out great. It was a lot of fun to do, so let me show you how I do it. So our first step is going to be to drill the hole for the hinge pin, and now this is really important to get dead center. So I'm going to use a pair of calipers, and I've milled my lumber to exactly 1/2 inch, so I'm going to measure a 1/4 inch, get it dead center, use a center punch, and I got this extra long drill bit for about $4 from the hardware store. It was 12 inches. I trimmed it down to fit my needs, but other than that, it was just this brass rod that I picked out. So let me show you how I lay that out, and let's drill a hole. So we're going to go ahead and put a 1/4 inch round over bit in our router, and that's so that we can perfectly round over the edges of our hinge, and that's going to allow us to have the hinge move freely, and it's going to be great. We're then going to head over to the table saw and cut our box joints. Now our box joints, it's really critical that you do a test cut because it needs to be exactly as tall as your piece is wide. So for us, that's 1/2 inch. So let's go ahead and get started. So we need to make a cut a 1/4 inch deep here, which is going to be the same distance to the center of your hole, because we're going to round this over for these hinges as well, and that's what's going to allow them to close flush. And then we're going to go ahead and clear out this waste here, and that's what's going to give us our hinge. And then later we'll release this. On the stopped hinge, again, we're not going to round over these corners. We'll round them a little bit, but the inside needs to be rounded over. So we're going to cut right in line with our box joints. We're going to cut a 1/4 inch deep, and then we're going to clear out all this waste with the dado stack here. As you can see, I cut these really wide, and there's a reason for that. I left them proud of halfway by about a 32nd, so that way I could clean up all these saw marks with a block plane. So I made them wide enough to be able to fit a block plane in here, so I can clean them up and get them fitting perfectly. So what we're going to do here, we're going to round over the edges of these guys. Like you said here, we're just going to complete that perfect circle, and that's what's going to make the normal hinge. And then for the stopped hinges, we're just going to round over this inside one, and this corner is what causes the stop on both of them. So we can round this one a little bit more than this one. We're going to slightly round those over for aesthetic purposes, but we're going to go ahead and clean these up with a block plane, and we're going to go real slow and make sure everything's nice and clean. I'm going to use something that is circular to draw kind of a reference line on both sides. That way kind of I know where I'm at, and I can keep testing it and seeing if it's working. So I'm cleaning these up, and to round over these corners, the pins get very fragile. In fact, I broke one already, but that's okay because you can always just trim down the size of your hinges. But I figured out a way to clean these up while supporting them. So I took the pin and loosely put it in there, laid these flat on my bench and hooked them up together. And that gives backer support on the pins when you're cleaning up this corner. And it also gives you a reference area to know when you're getting to be the right shape. Like you can see when it's rounding out to be even with your other one. Okay, so we've got our regular hinge all shaped and ready to go. I think I'm gonna give up on the stopped hinge here. It was great in practice here, but what happened when I was rounding out the corners here is, when I was rounding out these corners, this area just started to get shorter and shorter. So to have this be right, this area has to stay 90. And you gotta be really careful because they are very fragile. So we're gonna head over to the table saw, we're gonna trim these to the same length, and then we'll flush up the outside, stain them up, and they'll be ready to use in a project. Wow, guys, that really came out pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. Couple things I learned doing this. One is that these are very fragile when you're trying to clean them up at the end there. So be really careful, use support pieces. I showed you that way that I did it by inserting the brass rod, but just be careful. They really do have a tendency to break out. In fact, I lost one over here. This was the stopped hinge one I was trying to make. And again, the problem I ran into is that you can't sand the end of it at all. In fact, I might have even gone a little bit deeper on my box joints to create the stopped hinge and then slowly worked my way down until it worked. I just sanded a little bit too far, and I honestly just gave up because they were breaking and everything like that. If I was gonna do it again, I'd leave it a little bit longer and work my way down to it. Guys, thanks so much for watching. Let me know what you want to see on Joint of the Week down in the comments. And as always, stay safe in the shop and have a wonderful day.